Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. Davis. And
morning.
It's such an honor to have Lily. And Lily, we thank you so much for bringing Ms. Davis to Happy 50 Plus and more people in the AAPI Chinese American community. This is the very first time we get such a big group of audience from the Chinese American community. Then to have the honor to speak and listen directly face to face with Ms. Patti Davis. So I just want to remind all the participants, please keep yourself muted throughout this session. We are going to record the whole session, and later we are going to upload and share to our Happy 50 Plus YouTube channel. Okay, if you have any questions you want to ask Lily or ask Ms. Davis, please type in our chat room. Okay, so let's give the warmest welcome to Ms. Lily Liu and Ms. Patti Davis.
Thank you.
Amanda, thank you so much. My name is Lily Liu, and my Chinese name is Liu Yijun. I was on an event last fall with Ms. Patti Davis, and she was such a beautiful storyteller. I am the daughter of a mother who has had Parkinson's for 40 years and now has a little bit of Parkinson's dementia. So after the event, I said to myself, our Chinese American community needs to hear the wise things that Ms. Davis has been teaching us all, especially now that she has a new book out called Floating in the Deep End. And so when I extended the invitation to her and then Happy 50 Plus agreed, I was so grateful. So first, Amanda and your team, thank you so much for making this event available to our Chinese American community. Please let me greet Ms. Davis first. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our honor to have you join us, especially today on such an auspicious day, President's Day, as we remember your late father and mother. They were such friends of the Chinese American community. As I had said, I am the caregiver for my mother. So today we're actually just talking as two children of parents who have had Alzheimer's or will have dementia. And so would you please kindly give us the context? All we remember is that important letter that came out in 1994. Please share some of your memories of that.
Well, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 1994. At that time, it was a disease that many people had, everyone knew about, but no one was talking about. And he, of course, released a letter announcing that he had it and spoke about now entering the twilight of his life. That twilight ended up being a decade. And during that time, I wrote a book called The Long Goodbye, which was written in real time. It was almost written like journal entries about what I was going through. I began lecturing sometimes about being the daughter of someone with Alzheimer's. It was a learning process for me where I had no guidance because no one was talking about it. And actually, you know, as lonely as that was, it served me well because it ended up giving me the insights and the sort of practical ways of dealing with things that came up without anybody intruding and telling me I was wrong. It was kind of like beginner's luck. You know, beginner's luck works because you don't know any better. So you just try what feels right. And it wasn't like I was going to say to somebody, hey, you know what, my father did this, and I think I'm going to try this when he does that, because no one was talking about it. So it served me well many years later in 2011 when I decided to start my support group program Beyond Alzheimer's. I ran it for 5 years at UCLA. Then I moved it to St. John's Hospital for a year. After 6 years of running it twice a week, I decided to take it into, I needed to step back from doing that and get back to being an author. And I decided to take it to a new phase and license it to hospitals, which is, it's still available to be licensed. Geisinger Hospital in Medical Center in Pennsylvania licensed it. Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas licensed it. I got a number of no's, but mostly for the same reason, saying, well, it's not in our budget. It doesn't cost much to run this group, by the way. And it just sort of solidified for me that caregivers are not given the care that they need from the medical establishment. By the way, when I conceived of this support group program, I decided I was only going to run it, I would only allow it to be run in hospitals. And that's true for the licensing also. If someone wanted to license it and run it out of, I don't know, the basement of a church, I would certainly encourage them to start a support group, but it can't be this one. This has to run at hospitals. I want the medical establishment to extend itself to caregivers. And I also want caregivers to find some kind of comfort and healing in this scary environment of medicine, which is where they got the diagnosis that they feared of their loved one. So, you know, it has to be in that environment, in my opinion. Having not achieved, at least yet, my goal of having Beyond Alzheimer's be like the AA of caregiver support groups and be everywhere, I decided to write a book about Beyond Alzheimer's and the principles and the insights and the practical suggestions that are in that support group. So Floating in the Deep End is a handbook for caregivers. It's very well organized for that. And it is also part memoir, because if I'm going to advise you and I'm going to tell you, hey, this maybe is a good thing for you to try, or try looking at something this way, you need to know where I came up with that it didn't just, I'm not just throwing out stuff, you know? So it is both a personal story and a practical guide.
Well, that's why when I bought my copy, as I had said to you before, I literally put many stickies in it because, number one, the practical tips were so useful to explain what exactly dementia is. And then also the parts that I had the most stickies on was the authenticity of your storytelling of what the toll was and the happy times on you as a family caregiver. Mm-hmm. So let me repeat the name of the newest book, which came out last fall, Floating in the Deep End, How Caregivers Can See Beyond Alzheimer's. See, that's why we love you, is you're actually taking the voice and the actions of a family caregiver. May we step back real quick and think about 3 tips that you would give us as family caregivers of someone who's early dementia, because I think I must say it this way. We in the Chinese community have this concept of saving face, not right? So many people may not wish to have it publicly known that our loved one might have beginning dementia. So if you could give us 3 tips and then also share that wonderful anecdote about the barking dog.
Well, it's not just Chinese people who don't want to admit that their loved one has dementia. I mean, I ran a support group for 6 years, so trust me that it spans every culture, and you know, that's a common thing. But it's not a good idea, because people sense that there is something wrong with an individual, that they're, especially if that person is still in the workplace or even just interacting with friends, people can see that there's something wrong. And so they don't know, has this person started drinking? Are they taking drugs? Or I mean, they don't know, right? So it's a lot cleaner to just tell people. Also, I would say that a really good practice early on is to kind of assess what your relationship is with that person, especially if it's a parent. I've often said to people, before asking what you should do in a situation, ask who you are being in that situation. If it's a parent, and I mean, lucky you if you had a brilliant relationship with that parent and everything's loving and sweet. That's not the majority of people. There is a whole realm of things that, you know, histories of families that include problems. So if you're still that, resentful teenager, you might want to, this would be a good time to look at that. And people don't always want to hear that, because a lot of times, they'll think, well, wait a minute, all this stuff is coming up now for me again. And I went to therapy for this years ago. I mean, I worked on this and I got rid of it. Well, clearly you didn't, because here it is again. So now would be a good time to deal with the rest of that, because if that's what you're bringing into the situation, that's going to determine the outcome. Resentful 17-year-olds don't accomplish a lot, right? So that's one of the things that's different about my support group, is that I wanted to go deeper, and I wanted people to look at who they are and what they are bringing into the situation, before really saying, well, how do I deal with this? Form will always follow content. So let's look at the content first. Also, I would say you obviously are going to have to make decisions about this, but don't make decisions about what you think is going to happen with that person, right? Well, they're okay now, so probably it'll take like a year for them to get worse. You don't know that. They could get worse in a week. They could maybe not get worse for a year. You don't know that. So yes, you do have to think ahead in practical ways, but don't make assumptions. Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia is in control. It is calling the shots, and you better just take a back seat. And if you are a controlling person, this will be a good time to get that in check, because this disease will make a fool of you if you think that you're going to control it in any way. And I think the third thing would be, understand that the grieving process has to begin at the beginning. I've called Alzheimer's a death before dying. And a lot of times I've said to people, especially in my support group, how are you doing at the very early stages? How are you doing with your grief? And people have looked at me like I was crazy. What do you mean grief? They're still here. They're not dead. No, but they're dying to who they were. So you might want to start this grieving process now, because this disease offers you limitless opportunities to avoid grief. You can just keep yourself really busy. I have to dress them. I have to feed them. I have to make sure they don't wander out of the house. I have to answer the same question 50 times. I don't have time to sit on my own and be still and grieve. Well, you have to make that time. The idea is that if I push grief aside long enough, it will stay out there in some field somewhere and it will disintegrate. It doesn't work like that. Grief is not biodegradable. It will wait for you and it will come find you. And if it has to come find you, it will bring you to your knees and it will bring your life to a standstill. One way or another, you're going to have to cross that river. You might as well start wading in at the beginning.
Beautiful. I think that's why your second book, Floating in the Deep End, resonated so much with me. And I've now since bought The Long Goodbye, the first book, because you were so honest in this book that just came out last fall. Mm-hmm. You do not hold back. And the nice thing was you also approached it with honesty and humor. So the anecdote about the barking dog was really
barking dog. Right. So in the early stages, my father's Alzheimer's, we would take them for walks, sometimes around a park near their house. And one day we're walking past its gated house and a dog was barking on the other side of the gate. My father barked back at the dog. And my reaction at first was, oh my God, I was looking around and like someone's going to see Ronald Reagan barking at a dog. And then I thought, the whole world knows he has Alzheimer's. He's having fun. Who cares? Right? Which sort of gets back to people knowing that someone has dementia. A lot is, it takes a lot of the weight off.
Thank you for that honesty. Perhaps at this point, we wanted to get a pulse of our audience. I think we might be able to even do a poll, because I think what you've helped me understand is we need to be open. Mm-hmm. And so, Amanda, is it Stephanie that can actually put up a poll and ask our audience, number one, are you a caregiver right now? And if you are, my hat off to you, because you are now joining the community that Ms. Davis and I have been part of. And then second is, what else would you like to have about information about this disease? And, Ms. Davis, I think what made me really love your book was you said that Alzheimer's really can affect anybody. I had not realized that so many of the caregivers, about a third, more than a third, are sons and husbands, male caregivers. So in your support group, did you find that male caregivers had less ability to open up, or what were your learnings about the gender differences among caregivers, please?
I can't say that that I really did notice it. I mean, there were men who were amazingly open. There were at first, there were men that were amazingly open. There were men who were a little bit more closed off at first. The same is true for women. There were women who came in who were very defended. There were women who came in and couldn't stop crying. I didn't see. I didn't see really any difference. I think the act of coming to a support group and saying, I need help, I need guidance, says a lot about a person. I mean, that speaks to their desire to make sense of the journey that they're on.
Is the book then, well, first I must ask you, because I love the title, Floating in the Deep End. Teach me where you came up with that beautiful description about how you were feeling.
So my editors early on, it was initially when I submitted, I think I like 40, 50 pages to them, and we, I had a book deal, and it was called Seeing Beyond Alzheimer's. And they said, you know what, I think we can put Beyond Alzheimer's in the subtitle, but you need a more lyrical title. So water's a very important element to me. And I don't know, it just came to me. I'm pretty good at titles. So it came to me pretty quickly, because that's the feeling that you're out in this deep sort of fathomless ocean, and you're trying to float there. So, that's how it came to me.
Well, water is so key to your late father and to you, and also horse riding. I saw the beautiful interview you did for the Today Show, and it taught me a lesson, which is if you know someone's medical and cultural and personal background, it brings back ideas of what they're doing now. So teach us about when you said you saw the hands were up in the air, your late father, towards the end of his life. Give us the story about that, please. That was beautiful.
So my father was bedridden for the last 3 years of his life. He had fallen and broken his hip. He was mobile for a while, but he had no interest in doing physical therapy. And anyway, he ended up bedridden for the last 3 years. So I would say maybe 2 years into that, once in a while, he would be lying in bed and his hands would be up like this and kind of moving. And one of the nurses once said to me, I wonder what he's doing. And I said, he's riding. Because in English, you hold the reins in both, one rein in each hand, as opposed to Western where you just have it in one hand. So I said, he's riding. I mean, I have no absolute confirmation that that's true, but I think I'm right. I mean, it made sense to me. I think one important thing to remember is that wherever someone has drifted off to in this disease, they're usually okay there. It torments us to watch them there, and it looks like misery maybe to us, or whatever it looks like to us. But to them, they've gone somewhere, and they're generally pretty content in the world they have drifted off to. I tell a story in my book about someone in my support group whose mother was already in a facility. She was in the late stages of dementia, and this person would visit her, and they said, I feel awful because she's so lonely and so sad, and every time I visit, she's just sitting by the window looking out. And they said at the facility she doesn't really interact that much with the other residents. And, so I'm the only socialization she gets. And I said, wait a minute. I said, you have no idea where she is. She could be walking on the beach in the Bahamas with some gorgeous man at sunset. And then you show up and ruin the whole thing, right? You don't know. So again, like I said, don't make assumptions about this disease because you don't know.
I think that's what humbled me when I read your latest book, is because we have so many people of faith in our Chinese American community. Mm-hmm. You went very deep into, there's the physical body and then there's the spirit, the soul. Could you talk a little bit about that, please? Where did your father's soul go?
Well, I hope it went to God when he left. But what grounded me from the beginning when he was diagnosed was my belief that his soul could not be sick. And I told myself that right at the outset, and it grounded me for the whole 10 years. And I think, obviously it is a matter of faith. When I have said that to people, because it's one of the principles of my support group, when I've said that to people, I'm always very conscious of the fact that there are people who don't believe things like that, who are agnostic or atheist, which is fine. That's none of my business. But I would say to anyone who is in that category, consider the possibility. You don't know what's not true. So it's going to affect how you deal with that person. What our physical senses tell us and observe about anything is not the whole story. People decided the earth was flat because they looked out and their eyes told them that the boat just fell off the edge of the water, right? So we know that's not true. At least I hope that most people know that the earth is not flat. These days, I'm not so sure what people know, but most people know that the earth is not flat. So, right, our physical senses do not always tell us the whole story.
Well, I think what I really respect about you is your honesty, You could have stepped away from being an advocate for all of us who are going through it now. Could you tell the story? Because I think at the end, the very last moment of your late father's life, how he came back, his eyes, because I do notice when I see folks with Alzheimer's, dementia, their eyes look different. Mm-hmm. That story of how he snapped back. Please share that, because I think a lot of us would benefit from that story.
That really was my proof that my belief that his soul couldn't be sick was true. Before he died, I would say like for probably a week before he died, his eyes hadn't really opened at all. And probably for about a year prior to that, his eyes weren't blue anymore. They were they'd faded to this sort of grayish blue, and they were quite distant, as there is a look to Alzheimer's, and they'd been distant for a while, but they hadn't even been blue. And a moment before he died, he opened his eyes. They were blue again. He looked at my mother with full awareness. I mean, he showed up, he was there. And then he closed his eyes and he passed. And I thought I was just in the presence of a miracle. And I was also in the presence of confirmation that the belief and the faith that I had hung on to for this decade was true, because there was his soul and it showed up a moment before he died. And I had asked the nurse the night before, because we didn't know if he'd make it through the night. And my brother-in-law was flying back from a vacation in Hawaii in the middle of the night. And I think he waited for him. But anyway, we didn't know if he'd make it through the night. And I asked the nurse the night before, do you think that something will happen before he dies? I've heard of, people coming back right before they die. And she said, I think he's too far gone. I don't think so. But he did.
That story always brings tears to my eyes when I read it. And when you tell it, thank you for that.
Sure.
We must be realistic though, right? When someone is sitting in front of us asking again and again the same question, or saying that I haven't eaten yet and they just ate a full meal, Any tips on how to actually handle something like that? That was what was so valuable about your latest book, Floating in the Deep End. It had practical tips.
Right. So, well, first of all, I want to say, if you are annoyed by that, don't get mad at yourself. It's annoying. I think Buddha would be annoyed if he were in that situation. It's annoying. But what usually works is to change the scenery. If that person is, you're sitting in a room and that person thinks that they, need to have breakfast and they just had breakfast, get them up, go take them out to the garden, go take them out to another room, change the scenery. You have to remember that with dementia, every moment's new. So if they're seeing something different, they're going to relate to that. Now, it doesn't always work. Sometimes people are stuck in a loop. But if that doesn't work, then try another room. It usually works because you're giving them other input to focus on.
That's very wise. I will remember that. We have folks joining us from all across the United States. This topic really resonates. I will invite anybody who would like to ask a question in either English or Chinese to start putting it in the chat, because we will have a chance to speak directly with questions to Ms. Davis. And then I'd like to ask Ms. Davis right now, I will be honest that in the Chinese American community, we're sort of underserved in language, And so what I loved about your latest book was you took everything as a guidebook concept. You literally break down what dementias there are. So I always get confused when people say, what's Alzheimer's and what's dementia? One of them is the overarching. Help us with that, please.
Yeah. And, I still try to, help people privately. And I'm always shocked when someone asks me a question like that, because I think it would have taken the doctor 5 minutes to explain this to you. Why don't they explain this to people? And it's infuriating to me. So, and I do have a whole chapter where I give you the whole breakdown of different types of dementia. So the chapter heading, if you will, is dementia. And underneath that is vascular dementia, is Lewy body dementia, which is a combination of Parkinson's and dementia. Lewy body dementia is very different from Alzheimer's. It's what Robin Williams had, and it's very brutal. There's frontotemporal dementia, which usually strikes people before the age of 50 or around 50. It's also extremely different than Alzheimer's and is a complete personality transformation. Behaviorally, it's quite devastating. There's something called Creutzfeldt-Jacobson disease, which has been called Alzheimer's on steroids. It is Alzheimer's, but it moves at like lightning speed. I think I've gotten most of everything, but anyway, there's a whole chapter where it breaks this down. So Alzheimer's, when they rule out everything else, Alzheimer's is the diagnosis. The mistake that a lot of people make is they go to their internist for a diagnosis, and he just goes, he looks at the symptoms, goes Alzheimer's, and then they give them Aricept. Well, if it's Lewy body dementia, they shouldn't be given Aricept. And there were instances in the support group where someone described symptoms that sounded like Lewy body dementia and said it had been diagnosed as Alzheimer's. Their parent had been given Aricept. We strongly suggested that they get another opinion from a neurologist. It's really important that you get a diagnosis from a neurologist. And it turned out to be Lewy body dementia.
Yes, I think I'm going to take a drink of water only because this has been such a rich discussion. Just a quick question then. If we were to have the issue of having a parent or a spouse with Alzheimer's, and then we think what lies ahead in the genetic pool, if it's a parent and I start getting scared, what would you say to me about my fear of what might lie ahead, please?
I would tell you that your fear is not going to help you. So I think, my approach to fear is not to go, okay, well, I can't feel like that. You feel as you feel. but it's instead to go to sort of talk to that fear and go, okay, thank you for sharing. I know I have a fear response for reasons, because sometimes there's a reason to fear. This is not one of them. The genetics when it comes to dementia are sort of all over the place. They do believe there does seem to be a genetic link to early onset Alzheimer's, which means before the age of 50, but especially if it shows up generationally, if you look back in generations and it's shown up once or twice in each generation. So there appears to be a genetic link there. But what I always tell people is there is only one disease where if you have the gene for it, you're going to get it, and that's Huntington's chorea. If you have that gene, if you don't die of something else first, you will get Huntington's chorea. That's the only one. Everything else is a matter of percentages. And you know what? The truth is they don't really know. They don't know. So, you know, the testing of, oh, I have this gene for this, I think it's very damaging because, I mean, the gene for Alzheimer's, I think it's very damaging because if somebody knows that, they're going to perseverate on that. They're going to think about that. Nobody is strong enough to put that out of their mind. And I tell a story in this book about a man who I would run into when I moved from New York back to Los Angeles after my father was diagnosed a little while after. And I rented this small, funky apartment on the poor end of Carbon Beach in Malibu. And I would take walks on the beach to the rich end of Carbon Beach. And I would run into this man who was in the film business, and we had crossed paths before. And his mother had Alzheimer's, and he, of course, knew who I was. And he would stop every time we'd stop and talk, and he would tell me about his mother, and he would say things like, you know, she's just not there anymore. And I would try to say, no, I mean, her soul's there. And he didn't want to hear that. And then he would say to me, and you know, I'm going to get it too, because I mean, she hasn't, I'm going to get it. And I would say, no, you can't think that. He didn't want to hear that either. So finally, I just stopped trying to respond because it was clear to me that he didn't want to hear what I had to say. And years later, he got Alzheimer's. Now, I mean, I can't prove, nor can anyone, that he got the disease that he was sure that he was going to get, but he was sure he was going to get it, and then he got it. So just on that alone, maybe don't indulge that fear.
Thank you. That's very good advice. And Miss Alice Wong, Alicia Wong asked then, on the opposite side, what might be some effective ways to not so much prevent, but to, you know, engage in healthy behaviors? I know you're an avid exerciser.
So the wisdom is whatever is good for the heart is good for the brain. You know, a good diet and exercise is good for your heart, it's good for your cardiovascular system, and it's also good for your brain. And anybody who works out knows that when they work out, your endorphin levels rise and your whole body chemistry changes. So, you know, even if you just go out and take a walk, jump rope, do something, you know, get your body going. Also, you know, I think diet is extremely important. If you're going to eat junk food, you're not going to get away with that for long.
May we spend a few minutes then and ask about the effect on spouses? Right now, my paradigm, my model is child taking care of a parent, as was yours. Talk about some lessons learned you saw with your support group as a witness to your late parents. What does the spouse and spouse dynamic look like, or some things you learned from that exposure?
You know, there are similarities, but obviously because of the disease, but there are also vast differences. I mean, this is your life partner, and you're losing them in a different way than someone loses a parent. The grief is different. The grief cuts deeper. I certainly saw that with my mother, and I saw that in my support group, particularly people who were losing a spouse to early onset Alzheimer's, someone in their 50s. I'm thinking of one man in particular. I mean, you you think about growing old together and you know that somebody's probably going to die before the other person, but you don't think about your spouse in their 50s getting dementia. So it is, it's devastating. And one of the aspects of that that's very difficult for people to talk about is that their sexual relationship with that person is gone. They don't feel attracted to someone who has regressed, close to childhood, or is having trouble with their bodily functions or things like that. And that's a very painful thing for people to talk about. There was someone in my group who came for a long time before broaching that subject. But that is what happens. There is no way you can still have that kind of heat and that kind of attraction with someone with this disease. However, relationships are about being in love, but they're also grounded with love. And even in a relationship where disease is not part of the picture, you're not like crazy in love with that person every day. Sometimes you are, sometimes you can't keep your hands off them. Sometimes you can't stand the way they chew, right? That just is, sometimes you want them to go in the other room. You don't want anything to do with them, right? But you still love them. That's still the foundational reality of your relationship. And I don't think that Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia destroys that. So yes, the in-love part, the lust part, the attraction part is going to wane and disappear. But your love for that human being, your love between your two souls, is not something that this disease can destroy.
That is beautiful and wise advice. Thank you for that. And you were witness to that in your own family. In your starting up the support group, so many of us have trouble finding a support group. So any tips? Is there like an agency someone could call, or is the best way to ask at a doctor? Any tips on finding support groups, please?
Well, I think there probably still aren't enough of them. I mean, when I had the idea to start Beyond Alzheimer's, I Googled Alzheimer's support groups in Los Angeles. I didn't find many. I haven't really paid attention lately, but I would say, like you find anything else, Google it. And if you can't find one, then I would say, try in your life to find other people who have some kind of experience with dementia. Most people do, and talk to them. I mean, you need this. It is a lonely journey, and you need travel buddies. So I still hope that Beyond Alzheimer's will be in more hospitals and will be widely available to people. Maybe it will happen. I hope so. I'm trying.
So please remind us again, it is currently licensed at 2 locations?
Yes, at Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas and Geisinger. I'm not sure with COVID, what the status is, but so I'm working on it. So hopefully it will be licensed more places.
Thank you. I think we need one in the Chinese community. We'll have to explore that. Yeah, give us 3 points of why someone could benefit from going to a support group then, please.
Well, I think you don't feel as lonely. You feel that your experiences aren't unique to you, that other people also share the same thing. And you can get guidance for things that you need guidance for. There are people in a room full of people. There are people who are in the latter, whose loved ones are in the latter stages or just starting out. And so you get help not just from the facilitators, but from other people in that group.
I think when I learned about your latest book, Floating in the Deep End, I was touched in the sense that you lost your late father in 2004, over a decade ago. You could have walked away from all this, and yet you have continued your family's to write the latest beyond Alzheimer's, what you wish for yourself, and then for those who will come to this book?
Well, I think if you go through something in life and you learn lessons from it, if those friends didn't have any similar experiences. So it just became clear to me that there was a need for this, and that people were feeling lost and feeling alone on this journey. So it would seem very selfish to me if I had figured out some things and I had some insights and I could help people. It seemed very selfish to not do that.
We're so grateful you did. We are so grateful because, as we all know, Alzheimer's sees no borders, knows no ethnicities. It's a, what's the word, all encompassing.
Equal opportunity offender.
Equal opportunity offender.
Yeah.
That's I have known that we're very lucky in the Chinese community because the Chinese local newspapers and the national newspapers always have a literary page. Fukan is what it's called. And so we have seen a rise in people writing about their experiences. So tell us a little bit about your writing of this book. Were there times that it brought you to tears again, remembering something? What is your writing process like?
Well, sure. I mean, if I was writing about emotional things, yeah, I sure that I teared up sometimes remembering things. My writing process for anything, whether I'm writing a novel or a nonfiction book, is I don't sit there and stare at the blank screen if nothing's coming right then. I go do something else. I'll go for a hike or go garden or something and let it percolate in my head. So I don't believe in saying I have to sit here in front of my computer screen from 9 to 11, no matter what. To me, it's not productive. So I approach it much more organically. And when I'm working on a book, it's sort of always filtering in my head and thinking, and I'm always thinking of things. And this, I remembered things not that I had forgotten about or blanked out on, but that I hadn't thought of for a while. So it was an interesting journey for me.
Well, we benefit from the fact that you have returned to the topic, and we're just so grateful that this book is available now. And just a quick question, because the title of your latest book published last fall is, Floating in the Deep End, What the Caregiver Feels, and then How Caregivers Can See Beyond Alzheimer's. Talk to us about what you mean by the beyond. What is it mentally and even physically that you want them to aspire to?
Well, as I said, my grounding of my experience was that I didn't believe my father's soul could have Alzheimer's. So the idea of, if you just even consider that as a possibility, you are looking beyond the disease. You are saying this disease is not the whole picture. I have faith that there is something beyond that. But also, I think for the caregiver, there is life beyond Alzheimer's. There is life beyond Alzheimer's while you are a caregiver. If you are a hands-on caregiver like you are, and it takes up a lot of your time and your life, you still need to have a life beyond that. This disease can imprison the caregiver as well as the person who has the disease. And that's not helping anybody out, and I think there's a lot of guilt sometimes for people who are caregivers who, in terms of like going out and having fun or going out to dinner, which obviously with COVID is maybe not the best example, but you know what I mean. Going out and socializing and getting away from letting someone else take care of your loved one, and going out and like having a life, and they feel guilty about that. But sacrificing your life isn't helping your loved one. It's not going to slow down the disease. It's not going to make any difference in the disease, right? It's just going to hamper your own life and your own health. So you need to see beyond what seem like prison walls to you. They don't have to be prison walls. I think maybe the best way I can put it is that Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia that you're going through with a loved one is something that you are going through. It's not who you are, right? I mean, you're the daughter of someone with Alzheimer's. That's a passage in your life, but that's not the entirety of who you are. And I think that's the mistake people make. It's like, this is all I am now. That's it. That's not it.
Very, very wise. I must remember that as I'm, doing laundry and other things. That's very, very wise advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. There is such wonderful traffic in the chat with people sharing resources that fortunately there are more and more organizations that are taking the time, money, and effort to translate materials into Chinese and offer other resources in Chinese. Just very quick, it's so difficult because there's such financial costs to all this. And somebody had asked, how do we go about? I've always said, look to the government agencies and social services. And the first place to start is always the Area Agency on Aging and the Office on Aging in any state. And those will be so helpful. Any quick tips as far as things that you've learned about from the caregivers who came to your support groups about how they found resources?
Well, I think, I always suggest to people that in terms of outside caregivers that they find an agency, because rather than just an independent person who's a caregiver, because if that independent person gets ill or can't show up or something like that, you don't have anybody. Whereas an agency, first of all, they're insured and they hopefully vet if it's a reputable agency, they vet the person. But also if somebody doesn't show up, then there's a substitute who can come. So I think that's, that's a safer way to go.
That's so true. So many things you learn about financial things, private pay, paid agencies. Becoming a caregiver is like a whole new profession. I think that's so true. Just real quick, what would you say about the point at which one should take someone to a doctor for a diagnosis? Any tips?
It's really important to get a diagnosis. I mean, I've heard people say, well, I know what's wrong with them. They're forgetting things. They have dementia. And first of all, you don't know what's wrong with them. They might not have dementia. There are things that mimic dementia, B12 deficiency, thyroid issues, a brain tumor. So you don't know what's wrong with them. And secondly, as we were talking about before, you need to know what type of dementia they have, because it matters in terms of what your experience is going to be. And also things like I said, like Aricept, if they have Lewy body dementia, they should not be taking Aricept, which is handed out like candy, by the way. So it's, I would say right at the beginning, you need to get a diagnosis.
COVID has made everything so difficult, added another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
In your 10 years with your late father, did anyone use technology? Were there ways that you all might have monitored him with, cameras or anything? Any tips about the use of technology? I know it was early on, but any tech tips that you had used?
No, because by the time he was bedridden, he needed nursing care. So there was always physically somebody there. But, there are baby cameras that you can put in someone's room so you can monitor them on a video. I mean, there's certainly ways to do that, but I think those were available at that time too, but at that point he needed round the clock nursing care. So there was always a nurse there.
Thank you. This has been such a rich, and we could continue this forever, because the most important thing is you speak with such honesty, and that's important. And number two, you speak with such love. May I, as a final question, ask you, what was your fondest memory of your father before he had Alzheimer's? And then what is a fond memory of that 10-year period when he was, with Alzheimer's? Just to you as a child or you as a young woman, and then a fond memory of the time in those 10 years between 1994 and 2004, please.
Well, I would say probably the older memories are swimming in the ocean with him. No one else really wanted to go out there in big waves, and I was scared too, but I wanted him to be proud of me, and I wanted to tackle those waves. And I learned a lot about life out in the ocean with him. He would tell me that if a wave is coming at you and it's starting to crest so that you can't really go up through the top of it and come down the backside, if it's a little bit past that and it's going to crash on you, you dive down underneath to where the water is still and you let it go past you, and then you come up on the other side. I mean, metaphorically, these are great sort of life lessons. And so I would say that, I mean, obviously horseback riding too, but my mind immediately goes to the ocean. And I think in the 10 years, maybe the day that, and I've written about this, the day that it had rained and the rain had stopped, and I was sitting with him outside at my parents' house, and it's way up on a hill, and there's a view of the city, and it looked really lovely, and there were clouds and sun over the city, and my father said, he does good work. And I just took a guess, and I said, who, God? And he looked at me, and there was just one of those moments of kind of clarity, and he said, yes. So there are other sweet memories, but that comes to mind.
Thank you so much. I'm in tears right now just because of your honesty and authenticity. As a family caregiver advocate, we thank you, first of all, for everything you've done and will continue to do, especially as a very, very well-regarded advocate for us family caregivers. And also thank you for joining our Chinese American community today.
Thank you.
Turn it back to Amanda as the CEO of Happy 50 Plus. Will you just say two words to give us hope as we're on this caregiving journey as Chinese Americans, please?
Yes, thank you, Lily and Ms. Davis. I think this is such a lovely and touching, and I think this is the very first time we can have Patti Davis, such a good and influential, inspiring, and empowered lady, who's been so much for the caregiver and the patients who diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And as a Happy 50 Plus, we have a mission to support the Chinese American and the AAPI older adult community. And we hope we can do more. And just like I mentioned to some of our members and followers, this session, this interview, this President's Day's special presentation is a kickoff of the series of the dementia caring, sessions we are going to do. We are going to host from February to April. So in March, we are going to invite the researchers from UCI Mind. They are going to share with us, is there any hope, new development in medical field that will help the disease. And also we have AARP California. They are going to share the community resource guides for the family caregivers, for the patients, and to the Chinese American community. And also we are inviting doctors, medical doctors, to talk about the disease as well. And hopefully, Ms. Davis, we can get more support through you. And we as Happy 50 Plus, we love to start up the supporting groups or sessions or sharing, because we do need that. We always think we are underserved, but we don't know where we can get the help. So we really appreciate Lily bringing you to us today. And I think that's a big bless to the Chinese American community. And hopefully we can definitely do more. If you have time, you're available, we can provide all the translations. We will do whatever we can do. We just want to help. And thank you so much. Such two wonderful ladies. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.